1.
Welcome to the Fourth Line Podcast, part of Full Press Radio. This is April the 12th, Trade Deadline Day 2021. With you today is myself, Carl, and Stevie Nick.
First of all, thank you for reverting back to the old nickname because it's well-deserved today.
I mean, I think any name I refer to you as is a nickname. Let's be honest here.
That is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true. Today's the trade deadline. It's over now. And it was a day that happened.
It felt like a normal Monday, let's be honest.
It's just a Monday.
This was the most Monday of trade deadlines, but let's start with something more important. I did not think that anything would be able to steal the thunder of trade deadline day, and yet I log on to do the show tonight, and I see over your shoulder the one and only Phil Kessel staring at me. What is going on over there, Nick? The ever-evolving background has added a new piece.
There is a new piece today. It is a, I guess, life-size cutout of Mr. Kessel, but just from the shoulders up. And it's not just any picture of Phil Kessel. It's his infamous U.S. Olympic picture.
Yeah. Arguably the worst picture of Phil Kessel in the history, or best.
/ best.
Yeah. But that's what greeted me today. I could not be happier that was your addition.
This we had done up for our wedding, and we put it on a hockey stick so that Phil Kessel could parade around the dance floor with us all night.
That's quite the wedding.
It was pretty great. People loved it. My dad loved it. Had a blast with that thing. It was a lot of fun. But it's actually, we got the idea because when we went to a music festival, I don't know, a long time ago, called Way Home in Ontario, and we saw somebody with one of those. You know how people at music festivals put them on big sticks to walk around so their friends can see them in the crowd?
Yeah.
Anyways, we thought it was hilarious. We got a picture with them. That picture is on our fridge. And now my daughter, if we hold her in front of that picture and say, "Where's Uncle Phil?" she points right to Phil Kessel.
That's great. Well, congratulations on the picture. And thank you for bringing that to us today. We got a ton to get into because it was today was a little underwhelming. Like we knew it would be. Yeah,
but you could argue the trade deadline season, the week leading up to it, was more exciting.
Definitely. I mean, this weekend was good. We had some trades every now and again, kind of trickled in, gave you a little hit, which was nice. When you're not sitting around waiting for trades, getting a trade every day is really all you need to get by. That
is true. Although, the Taylor Hall situation, the insiders were tweeting the trade's imminent. So I spent all night on my phone, and then I went to bed, and then I woke up and it happened at midnight. So I didn't end up seeing it live anyways.
That is the best thing about being West Coast. I will say forever that Mountain Time Zone is the best sports time zone. Cause the 7 o'clock games out East are 5 o'clock. So typically you're home from work, you're there, and you can stay up only until 10 o'clock to hear that Taylor Hall is a member of the Boston Bruins. So
that's pretty great.
Yeah. But we're going to get into those. We're going to see, start by looking at some of the buyers this week. There were some teams that definitely were looking at filling in some pieces, but I would say, would you agree? No team really loaded up this trade deadline.
I wouldn't say anyone really loaded up, but I think some of the biggest buyers that we're going to talk about, they went and addressed their specific needs.
I think that's probably true.
Good.
Okay. Excellent. Well, let's get into it then. Florida Panthers. They were a team that certainly had some holes and we talked about that leading up to it, right? We talked about some of those areas that the Panthers needed to fix. Let's get into one of those. They went and picked up from the Buffalo Sabres, Brandon Montour, for a 3rd round pick. With Aaron Ekblad being out for the season, defense was number one. If there was anything that you could have said for a certainty, Florida was going after defensemen this deadline.
Yeah, and that injury only happened a couple weeks ago, and I wonder how much it altered their plans for the trade deadline. They are at the top of their division. They're probably a team, we talk about loading up. That was probably part of their plan to make a deep playoff push because they're in a good spot this year. And then the Ekblad injury, they may have been planning to go after Taylor Hall, but then the Ekblad injury happens. Now you got to alter those plans because you have to fill that gap on the back end.
Yeah. And they couldn't, there's no way to replace him. And in all honesty, there weren't a lot of defenders available this deadline.
No, there really weren't. And I think Brandon Montour he's a solid player. Like he's no Aaron Ekblad. He's not an offensive juggernaut when it comes to, offensive defenseman, but I think he's solid on the back end and he'll be good for them in the playoffs.
Yeah. So they brought him in for a 3rd round pick, heading back to Buffalo. And then today adding Sam Bennett from the Flames for what essentially amounts to 2 second-round picks. Emil Heineman, former second-round pick, but a second-rounder next year, which I find this trade interesting from both perspectives, right? But let's focus first on Florida. Them picking up Bennett. Where does he, do you think, fit in with this team and what they've got going on there?
He's a playoff guy, right? He's a big game performer. Plays well under pressure. He's not going to be playing on their top line, but I think he'll fit nicely into the middle 6. You've got Hornqvist on one line, you put Bennett on the other. Both of those guys kind of deliver a bit of a punch, a bit of aggression. I think he's a good pickup for the Panthers.
I thought whichever team picked him up would be a great choice for them as well. He's still a restricted free agent. So this is a guy that moving into this year, who knows what Florida will be signing him for, what kind of term, things like that. But this is not a short-term pickup for the Panthers. So to be able to get a roster player for this year and the future is a great addition for them.
Yeah. And honestly, for where they are right now and their kind of trajectory, it's worth the 2nd-round pick.
Yeah. And Heineman, a fine prospect. I don't know too much of where he's at in his development, if he's going to become anything, but definitely for what they paid for him, a fine addition. And I honestly think, you don't want to tweak lines too much, but I would honestly try Bennett up there with Barkov with what they've got right now, right? With some of those lines and the way that they've been adjusting and tweaking them lately, try them with Barkov, move them around, see what you can get with them. Because you never know what a guy out of a system like Calgary can do once he gets to something a little stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see. This Florida team is very interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah. So how much better do you think? They're leading the division still. Do you think that this in any way impacted their likelihood of winning this division, making it to the Final Four?
Yeah. I think they're a better team than they were 2 days ago or 3 days ago, or whenever that Montour trade happened. They're definitely a better team. I think they've got the momentum behind them. They've got the confidence right now. I still struggle with the whole, are they better than Tampa question? I don't believe that to be true. So are they going to win the division? I don't know. Probably not. I like their chances in at least the first round of the playoffs though.
Well, I think because right now they'd be facing the Nashville of this, right? If they finish as the number 1 seed, certainly I think they'd win that matchup and move on to the next one. If they're the second facing off against Carolina in that other matchup, that's a little tougher.
For sure, it's tougher.
I don't think that they're better than Tampa. Tampa's the defending champs, and I always like to hold to the idea that unless you significantly change your team, you're the defending champs and you are at the top of your game. And Tampa has been this year, right? Nothing's changed. And in all theory, they will be getting Nikita Kucherov back for the playoffs. The best free agent pickup or trade deadline pickup of any an Unreal Edition. Like not even close. So
yeah, easily. But they also went out and made a trade this week too, right?
Yeah.
To get their team ready. Overpaid a little bit, but
I was gonna say, let's touch on that right now. David Savard heading from Columbus to Tampa, and the overpayment you mentioned was the price tag of a first round pick, as well as and correct me on how this all went down. They traded the third to Columbus and a fourth to Detroit. Is that how it went down?
Yes. So I think this is how I think it worked. It happened in 3 different trades, okay? Because it all worked with the salary retention. So Columbus traded. No. It started with Detroit and Tampa. I'm looking at the trade. I'm trying to make sense of it. So I believe Detroit sent the AHL player Brian Lashoff to Tampa Bay for David Savard and a fourth round pick. Carl, I got it backwards, man. I can't figure it out.
It's confusing. Nonetheless, kind of Detroit and Steve Yzerman set a trend this week that I think we kind of expected to see coming, but we saw, I don't know the official note on it, but it feels like it had to be a record for 3-team trades this week, because we saw with Detroit, we saw San Jose do it, where they would get into a trade just to retain some salary on it and get a pick out of it, right? So in this trade, Detroit retained half. So Columbus retained half, then Detroit retained half of that.
So for about
$1 million of year-long cap space, Detroit essentially was able to buy a 4th round pick. Nothing to get excited about, but the fact that we're in this situation where picks are able to be bought is an interesting scenario.
Yeah, and like you said, it happened more than once. It's just a great way to weaponize the cap space. It's a really creative ways for a team to work around the salary cap, especially in this flat cap kind of world. And it's a great way to get a pick out of another team.
Absolutely. I very much am in favor of teams doing this. No issue with it at all. And if you have that cap space, might as well make use of it, right? You can't take it with you. And for a team like Detroit, money is not the issue here. They're able to take advantage of that.
Lots of space.
And to get that done. So there, David Savard, though, going to Tampa. Why? I mean, I get why he went there, right? Like, they're very strong up front, being able to add another defender, great. But why was he the one netting a first round pick?
Well, I mean, like you said, there weren't that many defenders available this year. So I don't know. He was one of the few. I guess that drives the price up. A first and a third and a fourth seems pretty high for a guy like Savard.
Yeah. I mean, again, Savard has never been an extremely offensive player, right? So he's gonna give you that stronger back end. I mean, as I guess technically a former Red Wing, what kind of insight do you have on Savard for us?
I don't have much. But he's not a huge offensive defenseman. To me, the question is, who did Tampa have last year that was this like strong, solid defensive defenseman that they feel they're missing this year?
I mean, was it Bogosian? Is that who they paid a first round pick to replace Zach Bogosian? Because maybe not.
I don't know. It's weird. He definitely makes their blue line better, but it's not like their blue line is full of unknown AHL players or bottom 6 defensemen.
No, their defense is as good as many or most in the league.
Yeah, like they don't need him. So I'm not quite sure why they went out and did this. I mean, they clearly see, obviously this is their window because they just won the Stanley Cup, but they see a clear path to it again this year.
Yeah. And I think you got to take advantage of that window while you can.
The pick's not going to do anything for them this year anyways.
No, but it's just you get into that cycle, right? And I think we see some teams in the past have gotten into that cycle. I think of Pittsburgh especially, right? Who trade pick after pick after pick and rarely have their whole onslaught. Toronto right now taking advantage of some of those teams. And I think if you can do that to extend that window, great. And if you really think that David Savard is that missing piece and that's going to be what puts you over the top, do it. But for me, I think when I look around at what other players cost, a little overpay.
Yeah, I think so too. It was one of the bigger overpays of the last week.
It was not the biggest overpay though.
No, what do you think the biggest one was?
I think the other Columbus trade was a bigger overpay than this one.
I kind of agree. I think either that one or the Palmieri Zajac one, I thought was a lot.
I think that one is fairly okay. I personally really like what Kyle Palmieri brings, and I think his addition to that team with Anders Lee being gone for the Islanders was really good. But let's go to Toronto. Let's head on over there and look at some of their moves, because there was an interesting deadline for Toronto in really two different aspects. So they went out and they picked up your favorite, Nick Foligno. I'm surprised it took us this long to mention him, and I was the one who had to do it.
This happened yesterday. It was pretty happy in our household yesterday. Just good moods all around. Nick Foligno coming to Toronto, which means I'm going to get to watch a lot of him in the playoffs, because that's what's going to be on the TV in my house.
Like for what, maximum 7 games?
Yeah. Well, no, Carl, he has the playoff experience of the second round. So
he has made the second round once. Yes, he has. You are correct.
I don't know. I honestly think it's a good pickup for Toronto. I don't think there's such a thing as an overpayment for Nick Foligno.
Okay, but like you're looking at this through Foligno colored glasses, are you not?
Yes, I am.
No, okay, because like this was, so what they paid for him was a first and a third. I'm just pulling it up. Here. A first and a fourth. And when I look, I mean, you suggested that the price tag for Savard was so high because of the lack of defensemen. The Foligno pick, there was guys of his stature available in a lot of places.
Yeah, I agree.
And the fact that was the price tag, it was like I heard other teams were in on him, right? It was what? Apparently Colorado was in on him. And there was another team that's slipping my mind right now that was reportedly in on him as well. I just feel like a first round pick. Now, granted, if you would make it to the second round, that's now a much lower pick than it would be otherwise. But that first round pick can certainly still have some significant value. And I don't see Foligno bringing more than what Toronto's already done. Like with what they've brought in this last year of Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton and some of those like veteran stalwart kind of players. Do you need another one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick Foligno is better than some of those guys. He has more to offer. He's certainly not a huge offensive player. He's not going to add a ton of scoring. His defensive play is great. He's great on the penalty kill. He's good in the face-off circle if you need him to be. He's that confident, gritty player. Intangibles, Carl. He's got a lot of intangibles. He's probably a great locker room guy. I honestly think at this point, the Leafs don't care about picks. They don't need them. They're in the Stanley Cup hunt and they're good enough to win it. They don't care about picks.
And that is kind of that point, right? Because like how many drafts in a row now is it? They didn't have a first round pick last year. I do not believe. I don't think they had one the year before that. This has been, Toronto might as well just fire the amateur scouting department, or I guess not be looking for first round talent.
It's worse than the first round. You want to know how many picks they have in this year's draft right now?
I do.
3. You want to know how many picks they have in next year's draft? 3. Like they're not in on the drafts for the next couple of years. They are all in for the Stanley Cup.
At least they do have those higher picks next year, right? They have their first, they have their second, but Foligno was traded. Last year, because I think of some of those other trades. I know Muzzin lost them a first. It's been a stretch where they're doing this, but helps them build some of this team.
Yeah, I think the Leafs are one of those teams that went out and they had some holes identified. It certainly isn't elite scoring. They've got that covered.
No, right? They didn't need to go out and I know Leafs fans really wanted Taylor Hall, but that was not what they needed.
Their biggest liability has always been goaltending. And they I don't think they fixed their goaltending problems by bringing in David Rittich, but they made a move to address that. I think defense has always been kind of an area where they just haven't been as good, and they went out and gotten defensemen who are better, and also forwards who are more defensive minded. So I don't know. I kind of like the moves they made. I think it puts them in a better position to compete.
Yeah. Well, and the Rittich trade was interesting for a couple of things, because it kind of like the Leafs have been very silent on Freddie Anderson's status.
Yeah.
And this kind of cemented the fact that like he's not back anytime soon.
Yeah. Bit of a weird one too. Like they're not saying anything about it.
They barely even said when he kind of went from, because he was day to day when he first went out, and now it's just kind of.
Now they said it's a long time. It's basically all they've said.
Yeah. So with him being out, Jack Campbell has made it so that if Freddie was back, there's no need for them to go pick up another goalie, right? Yes. He is, when you win 10 games in a row, a team can ride you for a little bit, especially as the potential backup, right? You're going to ride that goalie as long as you can. David Rittich comes in. He was able to push for the net in Calgary, took that job, ran with it a bit, and has had some success. Not so much this year, though.
No, and I think that's fine for the Leafs and where they are right now. I think Jack Campbell's been amazing, and he's setting franchise records and league records. I don't know how sustainable that is. Like the playoffs are a whole other monster. And I really think this team in particular is going to have to put some weight and pressure on the entire goaltending tandem, not just on one guy. I don't know. We'll see how Campbell does.
Well, but also having that extra piece, right? I can tell you this. As a team that played Michael Hutchinson in the playoffs last year, you do not want to do that. The Colorado Avalanche got that desperate for goaltending that they stooped to the likes of Hutchinson. I would suggest not. So I fully endorse picking up some other piece of goaltending. And goalies were affordable, that you could get a decent backup for what amounts to a third this year.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I don't really know how to judge goalie trades because I don't really know how to judge goalies. I find it they're very weird. But a third round pick didn't feel like too much to give up for this.
No, not in the slightest. So there you go. Toronto, Toronto currently leading the North Division, and I think the favorite to win the North Division. Would you say how much better does this make them outside of this division now? That's kind of been the question all year for Toronto, right? Of like, well, sure, but they're playing against the North, and there are some real bad teams in this division. Do you think that this lets them challenge the Tampa, the Vegas, the Colorado that we see in these other divisions?
I think it gives them a better chance against some of those teams, but I don't think it shoots them that much further ahead. No.
Are they in that tier for you though?
I think they have to be in that tier. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that they were in that tier before this week?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think so too. It's so tough. I would put them at the bottom of that tier. I would put them if there's like a 1A that's just Toronto. Like they're really very much in that, like just by themselves. I don't really have anyone else that I would put in that with that many question marks.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that assessment.
So let's look then at another team that went and picked up a goaltender. My Colorado Avalanche.
They were busy this week, Carl.
But like just in the most tinkery of ways.
But that's what this whole trade deadline kind of was. Don't you think? Like it was like these buyers that we're talking about, they're just kind of tinkering. It's nothing earth-shattering.
So the Avalanche made, let's see, 1, 2, 3 moves this week. And let's start with my favorite move of the week. The one that when I saw this happen today, and I'm going to tell you, my phone blew up as if they'd made a significant trade when this happened. I got messages on about every social media platform possible from everyone, from friends that do not even listen to this show, were very excited for me. Carl Soderberg is back.
You're really excited about this one.
Seriously, no word of a lie. I had chills.
Oh my God.
I'm serious. I was like, what's going, like, I know the deadlines come, like, is it really blowing up that bad that like my watch was just going crazy? And I saw what happened, and yeah, it's just, is he good? No. Is he gonna be like a ultimate depth guy that we can slot in and on a third line, fourth line, be able to get some minutes out of? Absolutely. But it brings me unreasonable joy that Carl Soderberg is back with the Colorado Avalanche.
We've talked about this before. He is the only other Carl in the league, right?
No, we got Carl Hagelin.
Yeah.
Was a Carl in the league.
Yeah.
And I believe those are the only two that spell it. And Carl Gunnarsson. Those are the 3 correctly spelled Carls in the league.
Okay. So you guys got one of them.
We got one back.
How long's he been gone? What, 2 years?
2 years. He went to Arizona for a year and then Chicago.
It's funny. Like I'm looking at his numbers. His numbers aren't terrible. Like you say he's not good, but he's not bad.
That's what I mean. Like he'll play for us.
He's fine. Did the Avalanche need him though?
Well, this is one of those things that like, this is the equivalent to us of how I feel the Savard trade is for Tampa, except it costs us like a 4th. Like a trade where like, did we need him? Not really. But it makes us better. No trade for a third liner is going to make you great, but it certainly is nicer than not having him.
I just think the Colorado Avalanche social media team missed hearing from you. So they're like, we got to bring Carl back so that we can talk to Carl again.
I literally talked to our friends from the Avs Hockey Podcast who run Avs Twitter Psychic. Because like since then, I've really been trying to find ways, right? Because the game that they play is every day you pick who's going to score the first goal. And I only ever picked Carl Soderberg. And I would tweet at him, Carl picks Carl, and that's it. And since then, I've been having to refer to people such as Cale McCarl, Nazem Karldry,
my God,
Mikhail Rantanen, Andre Burakovsky. And luckily, there's a lot of people on that team that I can kind of jam it in there and it works, but I'm so glad that he's back.
Well, I have a feeling that the Avalanche fandom is probably looking to ship you out for a couple picks to get rid of the awful puns, Carl.
Hey, look, I put a lot of effort into those and they should be so lucky to have me. To quote someone very wise, they should be so lucky to have me.
Okay, we'll get to that. Devin Dubnyk. Okay. I remember when the Sharks got him last year on this show, I said I think that Dubnyk makes them a better team. He didn't.
No,
he didn't.
Very much not.
So I ask you now, or maybe you should ask me, does Devin Dubnyk make the Avalanche a better team?
Yeah, what's I mean, from as the outsider perspective, we saw what he did in San Jose. Was the team the problem, or is Devin Dubnyk just really bad?
I mean, I think mostly the team was the problem in San Jose. I don't blame Colorado for going to do this, though. Like, they probably have a little bit of PTSD for what happened in the playoffs last year with their goalies. Because that all happened in one game, did it not? If I remember correctly. Didn't you guys lose both goalies in one game?
Did we lose? It was a real close stretch.
Francouz.
Francouz.
I just tried to say it with so much confidence that
I think we've played this game before, but where would you say Pavel Francouz would be from, Nick?
Russia.
I don't think that's correct.
I want to say France, but I don't think it's France.
I wanted to say I think he's Czech. And I'm right, he is Czech.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's been on your team for a long time, so I feel like you probably knew that, but that's okay.
I should know that. So okay, I'm fine with this from the same perspective of like I'm fine with the Leafs picking up Dave Riddick because with Freddie already out, who knows? You got to assume he's not back for the playoffs. Here, Francouz is out, so we're already down him. Grubauer has been playing great, right? I wouldn't say that, but other people are saying Vezina level. Then we picked up Jonas Johansson from the Sabres, who somehow has been playing okay. He's kind of come into being all right as the backup, but I don't trust him to be it.
I mean, I'm looking at this guy's numbers right now. They're better than okay.
Yeah, that's skewed from like a small sample size, and I believe he shut out the Ducks this weekend. Or last week.
Yeah, I mean, his numbers with you guys are really good. I'm sure they're not great with the Sabres.
Yeah, I believe it was a 880 save percentage with the Sabres.
Oh, yeah, that's very bad.
That's pretty bad, yeah. So I'm very okay to go out and pick up someone else. That said, we literally traded for Dubnyk, and then we started Johansson again in a game. So I'm fine to pick up Dubnyk. I mean, I guess get him in there, get him settled. Don't throw him to the Wolves right away. But I'm okay to continue to ride both of them. I'm okay to give Grubauer some time off, keep him healthy, keep him fresh, because right now we just need to get to the playoffs.
Okay, so they got Dubnyk for Craig Paterin and a 5th round pick in this year's draft. Would you rather get Devin Dubnyk at that price, or would you rather get David Riddick for a 3rd rounder?
I think for what he's going to be, I'd rather pay less and get the lesser goalie than pay more and get the better goalie. Because like in a dream scenario, we never have to play Devin Dubnyk when it counts, right? If we're having to get to that point where we have to play him, Riddick, Dubnyk doesn't really matter. I'd rather just pay a little bit less and just get that, okay, like 3rd option, 2nd option, than have to really overpay for something a little more and that we might never ever use.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I think I agree with that assessment. So you're okay with the price and you're okay with the goalie coming in, basically.
I mean, to me, it's just the pick. Paterin rarely played for the Avalanche, and in an ideal situation, he's not playing on this team. We got him as a salary dump. We traded away Ian Cole. He cost less money to be able to move some more of that out. Moving him out, let us move Soderberg in. So I'm very okay with all of that.
Okay. And hold on. I know we said we were going to go to break after this, but there's another Avalanche trade we have to talk about because our teams traded, Carl.
We did.
Our teams traded. This was earlier in the week. This was like Wednesday or Thursday. You guys bring in Patrick Nemeth. You're just getting the crew back together.
Patrick Nemeth is back as well, which I like. Again, Panarin goes out. That's like Nemeth and him, I think would be kind of interchangeable location wise. So that makes it easy. But I mean, which really begs the question, is the rivalry officially dead now? When Joe Sakic calls up Steve Yzerman and says, can we make a trade? And they do. Is it dead?
I mean, I think so. It's because it was a pretty, like, all around it was a pretty fair trade.
Yeah.
I think they're buddies now.
They're gonna sit back, have some drinks, maybe when things settle down a little bit, and reminisce about the good old days.
You know what is though funny about this generation of GMs? Because I've noticed it. Yzerman does it all the time, and I've kind of noticed Sakic does too. They're very casual when they meet with the press in terms of how they dress. Like Steve Yzerman always looks like he's like, I don't know if his house doesn't have heating, but he's always like bundled up in 4 sweaters, and he's got a hoodie on and like some sort of like neck thing, like just the complete opposite of the older generation who's always suited up.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone from Brian Burke's untied tie. We've gone from Brian Burke's tied tie to his untied tie to Steve Yzerman in a hoodie in his basement.
These guys, they're on camera, and it always looks like they're just coming home from the gym.
It's true. Which maybe they are. It honestly looks like they're recording a podcast is what it looks like.
Yes, it absolutely does.
So maybe their setups are very similar to ours. So
just without the Phil Kessel.
Exactly. You know what? We should send that to the GMs. See who takes it.
Just one for each of the 32 teams.
All 32 teams get one. You're welcome.
The GM's attention.
Courtesy of the fourth line. All right, we'll be back. We're going to take a break here. We'll be back. We still got trades to talk about, so we'll be right back.
Lots of trades.
3, 2, 1.
So we talked about the countdown is actually appropriate because we talked about 3 buyers. There are 3 pretty distinct buyers at the deadline, and there are 3 pretty distinct sellers.
There's some teams that definitely made some big sells and got some pieces in. Let's start with one that we've already talked a little bit about. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. We've talked about the 2 pieces they moved out. Columbus moving out Savard and Foligno. Was this what you kind of expected them to do at this deadline?
Yeah. It was. I mean, the thing is, they're pretty foundational changes to their roster. Like, they're pretty big locker room changes. And I think what it signifies to me is that Columbus, there's more change coming in Columbus. You don't move pieces like that and not kind of change direction here.
So what do you think then with them changing direction? What else is coming next then?
I think Torts is gone. I think they need a coaching change.
I would strongly recommend that for Columbus at this point. And I know they asked me today, they said, Carl, what should we do? And I said, look, you got to trade for Carl Soderberg. That's really, you need more Carl in your lineup. You got rid of a Nick, so you've got to have at least one of us on your roster.
Right.
They didn't listen to that, so I'm thinking they'll probably I think they're really focused on the Torts advice I gave them.
Yeah, makes sense. There's probably just a lot of yelling happening in the facility. And
it's true.
It's just too much racket.
There was a lot of commotion in the background. I don't know what it was, but I think you need to, because they're at a point where I think they're at that weird tipping point between like rebuild and still got it. And I think that they're closer to rebuild than they are to still got it. And Torts was the one that led this team from rebuild up to playoffs and beating Tampa and doing the things that they did. But I'm not sure you want to have that twice of a Torts-led rebuild.
No, I don't think so. I think you're starting to kind of see happening to this team what normally happens to Torts' teams after a few years.
And he's gotten longer out of this stint than he has several of the past ones.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, it's not all said and done. There's look, Foligno could still go back and sign with them in the offseason. Although, with every year that passes, it's another year further away from his prime. But I also think Columbus did something really smart. They went from having 1 first-round pick this year to 3 first-round picks this year.
Yeah, I mean, they did the opposite of what they did a few years ago when they traded all those picks, when they made that push, when Panarin and Bobrovsky were about to leave. And now they've loaded up. They don't have a second this year. They lost that in that year, right? They lost that in the single trade, but still getting those 3 picks. 2 will be later, but great moves for Columbus.
Yeah, 9 picks in a 7-round draft, 3 of which are in the first round. It was a really smart move from them, and you could argue that those other 2 picks are going to be later round picks, but this whole draft is going to be weird.
Yes.
Early, late, I don't think anyone's going to really have full confidence in, what they're getting.
I think this is, if any year to say just have picks, this is the year for that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've got Columbus, and I think both trades they made, they won both of those. I think
Agreed.
There was an overpay on both of those deals. And so great on them.
Agreed.
Let's head to Buffalo next. Buffalo, we already talked about the Brandon Montour trade. Taylor Hall to Boston.
I would love to see this guy's list of teams that he was willing to be traded to.
I forgot that he managed, I guess, to get a no movement clause in this contract. A 1-year deal with a no movement clause for that dollar amount that he got. His agent.
It's smart though, because it puts the power in his hands of where he goes at the deadline.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And he flexed that power big time.
Pretty strongly. Because what it sounds like was that the list of teams he would go to was Boston. It didn't sound like there was a lot of teams that it seemed. Now, maybe I'm misreading it, but it sounded like a lot of teams that maybe spurred him in free agency, or it didn't work out in free agency. Some of those other pieces, it really seemed like he was holding a grudge against them. Like, you didn't want to sign me for that much money. Well, I'm not going to you now.
It really hurt Buffalo in the long run. I think they're the team who's the most hurt by all of this.
Yes, but also they essentially, we talk about Detroit and those different pieces buying a 4th round pick for that much. They essentially, for the services of Taylor Hall for the year, bought these picks to be able to get to sign a guy on a 1-year deal and flip him at the deadline like this. It's not ideal. This isn't what Buffalo envisioned, I don't think, when they signed Taylor Hall. But if it wasn't in the back of his mind that he could go, that no movement clause would not have been there.
Yeah, I get that. It's just so hard to look down this list and talk about these trades. And we talk about Nick Foligno getting a first and David Savard getting a first, and Taylor Hall gets a second. It doesn't make sense from an objective perspective. I know there's this nuance with the no movement clause. It just feels like if I was a Buffalo fan, I'd be very disappointed by this return.
Absolutely. Right. A 2nd round pick for what Taylor Hall can be. And I know that he is not MVP Taylor Hall right now, but you also have to look at the teams and the situations that he was in. He was not in a situation like Boston is at all.
No.
So for him to be able to go in to a situation where he's not the guy, right? He can come in, you leave, Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak, you leave them doing their thing, right? Now you slot him in on a line with Krejci and see what he can do there. And I think that's going to really set him up well. I think Boston made, as much as, I don't like to say nice things about Boston, great pickup for them to be able to bring him in and for a very reasonable price.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't really been the Boston Bruins that we all know and hate this year. But I think that this is going to go a long way in helping them get back into that position.
The only thing that I was surprised with Boston is I was very surprised that they didn't go out and pick up a defenseman at this deadline. They were, because this past week they had Charlie McAvoy and Brandon Carlo both out of the lineup. And it was noticeable that they were both missing. And so with that, I think I would have expected them to go out. I would have expected a defenseman more than Taylor Hall.
I guess it depends on what you're looking for in your defenseman. You know, we talked about David Savard being the big get this year, but there were plenty of other defensemen that moved.
I say that. Mike Riley to the Boston Bruins. They did go out and pick up a defenseman, Nick.
Mike Riley? I don't even know who that is.
Mike Riley, Ottawa Senator. Mike Riley. So they did go out.
There you go. For a third round pick too.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And he's been having a good year. I take back almost all of that last point. And in the midst of all these mediocre trades that have happened, turns out one can really slip through the cracks for you.
That's totally okay. There's just a lot of middling players and a lot of draft picks that were flying around.
Exactly. But yeah, so a good deadline for Boston, right? A second and a third brings you in Taylor. If you could have told me a second and a third would bring you in Taylor Hall, let alone a second and a third brings you in Taylor Hall and a stopgap defender, I like that.
And so let's go back to Buffalo here. So they get a second for Taylor Hall. And what'd they get for Montour? Because that was their other kind of big move, a third round pick.
The third, yeah. And
that one's okay.
And previously, Taylor or Eric Stahl got them a third and a fifth from Buffalo.
Yeah. They're picking up the picks.
Yep.
That's what they got to do.
Yeah, so they got, 2/3, a second, a fifth, and
2/6.
Yeah. So they definitely did get some pieces in this, which is good for sure. All right. And the last seller, the one that I am surprised. This is the second time I've said it. I'm surprised that it took us this long to get to it. But it was the last move that managed to sneak through the wire. The Detroit Red Wings traded Anthony Mantha to the Washington Capitals.
For quite the return. This was like deadline. This was a deadline deal. This is what TSN's on the air for 8 hours all day. I was actually kind of disappointed with Detroit's deadline until this trade happened. And this is the last first round pick that was traded today. I think Yzerman got a heck of a return for Anthony Mantha. So the full return, I realize we haven't said it yet. The full return was from Washington, Jakub Vrana, Richard Panik, a first round pick this year, and a second round pick next year. All that for 26-year-old Anthony Mantha.
So the question I have for you, so two things. One, Mantha still has a significant amount of term for those that are not. So you say
he just signed this year.
Right, just signed. What, 4 more years after this? Is that correct?
It's 3 or 4. 3 years after this.
Okay, so 3 more years after this. Why? What is it that what does Washington see in Anthony Mantha that I do not? From the Washington perspective, why would they give up all of these assets when we saw Taylor Hall get traded for a quarter of this just yesterday?
I think that Anthony Mantha has a really good specific skill set. I think he just can't be the guy who lifts the team onto his shoulders and goes. He will be a great support piece for some of these players on Washington. He'll be a great addition to their power play. but he's just like on a rebuilding team. He's no good. He needs the support from better players.
This is the guy that you predicted would score 40 goals, was it not?
And he was on pace. He was on pace.
Okay. So you bring him to Washington. Can he reach your 40 goal hopes and dreams for him on Washington?
Probably not. I was a little bit excited about a younger player who was at a point in his career where it was basically do or die. Like, become this amazing goal scorer now, or it's not going to happen. And he started off on that trajectory. Then he got into a fight and broke his hand and missed a huge chunk of the season. And he came back and he was off that trajectory. This year, the inconsistency in this guy has been so frustrating to watch. He'll get going every once in a while, but then he falls off and becomes invisible. He doesn't look like he competes very hard. And this is like at where he's at in his career, you need to have that figured out by now. The inconsistencies have got to be ironed out of your game.
Do you think that part of that, I mean, you say like the effort's not there. Do you think part of that is just playing on a team where they're at in the standings, or
100%?
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think in Washington, there'll be a huge weight off of his shoulders.
For sure, right? There's no, I mean, with the price tag, there should be some pressure on him because that's a big price. But for what they're getting, I mean, Jakub Vrana has had some great moments and when you described like the inconsistencies, I literally thought, I mean, Washington's trading one for another, right? Like Vrana's had some great moments. Get buoyed by some line mates, right? Like when you come out and you're playing with Ovechkin and Backstrom and you're that line mate, that becomes part of that. But I mean, he's a guy who's on the verge of, really what you described as Mantha, right? Like being at that point where you need to show, are you this or are you not? Yeah. And I think, I mean, Yzerman and the Red Wings seem to trust in him and think that he is, or at least can be, or they're willing to try. Washington, somewhat surprising to me that they gave up on him that quickly.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And like you said, they went and got someone who's also inconsistent, but probably has more upside with a higher cap hit and a longer cap hit. So, again, I like this deal for Detroit. Vrana's not that much younger, but he has less term left on his deal. I also think part of this is you look at Detroit's rebuild window, and when they come out of this rebuild, Mantha's going to be past his prime. So you don't get what you can for him now.
Yeah. Well, and Vrana is a restricted free agent still. So Detroit will sign him. So he'll be back with this team next year. Term, I mean, Yzerman can decide what he's wanting to do there. So definitely gives some perspective. I was surprised. I mean, still some of those defensemen that you had talked about before, is that what you were disappointed that Detroit didn't go out and do, was kind of move some of them out?
Yeah, I think okay, first of all, big piece of bad luck for Bobby Ryan because he's out for the season.
Yeah.
And that was announced yesterday, I think. So that sucked. They moved John Merrill for a 5th round pick, which I thought was a bit of an underwhelming return. They moved Patrick Nemeth for a 4th round pick, which I actually thought was pretty even. But Mark Stahl's having a pretty solid season in Detroit. They could have retained some of that salary in sending him. Jonathan Bernier has been having a great season, but he's been hurt. And nobody really knows how he's going to come out of this with his injury. So the Ryan and Bernier things I kind of get because of the injuries. I think they should have moved Mark Stahl.
Yeah, and it is, I mean, with $5.7 million, that's a big price tag. And it's tough for Detroit to eat half of it and then need another team to eat another quarter of it to be able to get him on a team. Likely the biggest reason why Mark Stahl stayed, because there's definitely a market for him, just not at that dollar amount.
Yeah, exactly. And Yeah, it's tough to watch from a Detroit's fans perspective because he's actually having a pretty decent season.
Yeah, and not to be able to get something for that at the deadline's a little disappointing for sure. All right, one more trade that we have not talked about yet. New York Islanders went out, picked up Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac from the New Jersey Devils. It's been so long. This kind of kicked off this last week. This kicked off trade deadline week. This deal went through last Wednesday.
Yeah.
A good pickup for the Islanders.
Really good pickup for the Islanders. I think both of these players are going to help them down the stretch here.
And I know Kyle Palmieri. They lost Anders Lee being out. They needed to go out and pick up someone to fill that hole. And with Lou having kind of that history with the Devils, and Zajac was there when Lou was. Palmieri was not, right? I believe Lou was.
I don't know. I thought they were both there, but I could be wrong.
I thought he was in Toronto. I could, again, maybe I'm the wrong one, but giving up that first for him, we saw last year at the deadline, right? New York went out and they made the pickup for JG Pajot. Worked out pretty well for them, right? Signed him to what I thought was an unreasonably long and large contract, but has been pretty good. So I think, with this, they get two back. Travis Zajac nowhere close to the player that he once was.
Yeah.
But for what this team is, I certainly think that Barry Trotz can find a way to get some usage out of Zajac.
It's great. And it makes it better too that, the Devils are retaining salary. I still thought that the first rounder was a lot to give up, but that it's coming from a team that feels they have a good shot at winning this year. And it would probably end up being a pretty low pick in the first round anyways.
Yeah. So this was because we had 5 first round picks move this week. We had the Islanders, we had Tampa, we had Toronto, and we had Washington.
So 4.
Yeah. 4 of them. That's pretty good. We also had some other picks that aren't really. Do you have anything to add? Jeff Carter to Pittsburgh, Matthias Janmark to Vegas?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's just that it wouldn't be a trade deadline if Pittsburgh didn't make a trade. So that had to happen.
Pittsburgh had to make a trade for a veteran at the deadline.
They also had to include a million conditions on the picks going the other way.
Yes. Now you say that. I believe the number I saw is today was 19 trade deadline days in a row that the Colorado Avalanche have made a trade.
Really?
Yeah.
Just no blockbusters.
Not a ton in the past. What was the one?
Was the Kadri Kerfoot deal on trade deadline day?
No, that was free agency day. That one was a banger.
Yeah.
And then Brandon Saad this year. Joe Sakic will make some great trades. I believe the Matt Duchene trade was in the middle of November.
Yeah, that one was at a random time.
Yeah. All I know was it was a day they were playing the Islanders because I watched him get pulled from that game. And was it more giddy than Carl Soderberg getting traded? I also had chills that day.
Oh, God. See that look that Phil's giving you right now? That's how I feel inside.
That's reasonable. All right. Let's do we have time for the elimination station? Do we want to eliminate a team or do we want to push that to next week?
You tell me. I lose all sense of time when we talk every week, so I have no idea.
I'm with you on that one. What do you think? Do we want to let's eliminate 2 teams next week? We've done a ton right now. Let's eliminate 2 teams next week. Gives us a little bit more time we'll push off that Nashville decision.
Yeah, I really don't want it. I don't want to make a decision on Nashville.
Especially since after all of the talk of Nashville doing things and moving people out, it didn't cost them a lot, but they brought in players today.
They brought in players?
Erica Branson from Ottawa to Nashville. Again, sure, but still something.
And now David Poile's out telling the press he's not worried about losing Ekholm. They have a plan for him through expansion and into the future.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, all right. So let's put that up, but we will pick a new Nick Lidstrom.
I guess we have to, don't we?
So one thing I was like, man, we've, after talking to the store next door last week, I believe they did our first prizes in the mail on its way to Alex and
Yes.
kind of riding that. I was so excited that I was like, you know what, let's just do an extra game today. Let's, the Oilers got to be playing. The Oilers have now 4 days off because the Vancouver Canucks are still in COVID protocol. The thought is that they will be back on Friday. However, they just added a new player to the COVID protocol. Just yesterday, practice was canceled. Yeah. And so, they say Friday. I'm not sure how they're going to swing that.
Just terrible. So how many Oilers games did we get in?
We did get all the Oilers games in.
Good.
They're just the Oilers Canucks would have been playing right now. They are scheduled. Oilers will be playing the Canucks Friday if all goes according to plan, which also means that they did. And we'll see how this plays out as the playoffs start. But they did extend the season for the North Division even further. The North Division now ends their season May 16th.
Man, they're really pushing it.
They're really getting deep.
They're really pushing it. I do wonder if they feel they have a little bit of flexibility with the North, though, and operating a little differently with that division versus the rest of the league.
Yeah, but part of the problem, I guess, there has also been talk of bubbles.
It's not going to happen.
What they're going to do, but they have to get the North Division out of the North somehow at some point, right? They're not going to be able to bring teams in. So for that Final Four, they've got to play somewhere else.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll come south. There's no way that if they're going to do a bubble, the NHLPA has to sign off on it. There's no way the players are going to go put themselves through the bubble again.
Not for all of it. No.
Especially in the US where a lot of these guys are getting vaccinated now.
And teams are having fans in, right? Teams aren't going to want it right now either. So, all right. So let's see. We've got in the North Division, we've already had 3 teams in. In the East Division, we've also had 3 teams in. One of them is questionable at this point in time. In the Central, we've also had 3 teams in. One of them questionable at this time. And out West, we have only had 2. I've got, I know who I would be looking at and picking if I was you. But where are you thinking as our locked in team of the week?
Who do we already have in the West?
So in the West, we have Vegas and Colorado. In the Central, we have Dallas, Tampa, Florida. And then in the East, we have Philly, Washington, and the Islanders. There's a team that significantly stands out to me as a missing piece that has not made it yet.
In which division? The West?
Central.
In the Central. You said we have Tampa, Florida, and Carolina. Oh, Dallas. Yeah, it's Carolina.
Carolina's got to be the pick for this week.
Yeah. Do they have games? Did you check?
Carolina does have games. Carolina is playing Detroit right now.
Tonight,
is 0-0. And then they play Nashville Thursday, Nashville Saturday. And then we'll toss in Monday against Tampa as well. So if we play all 3 of those, that's 3 games. Tonight's game against Detroit likely. It's scoreless halfway through the second, so that's going to be hitting the under. So what you going to do? We've got our high-low sticking. You're going to head to Twitter for every game. You're going to tell us if you think the game will hit the over or the under based on what the betting odds say. If you are correct, you get your name entered in a draw. And after, we're going to do it probably even just one more week after this. Next week's episode, we'll pick another team. And then after that, we might already draw a name and send you something great. We'll send you a collection of options from the store next door, some great hockey products from them. We'll be sending one of those out your way. I'm excited to make that happen. I'm excited to get those out there and just to get more people knowing about the store next door. And
send us pictures of them when you get it.
Yes, please do.
See it.
I want to see that. Alex, he went bookends. I'm excited to see what they look like because they also, great thing. They like stain them. They're made of different products. You can pick kind of the color you want for it. Such a great deal over there. Really awesome. So there you go. Carolina Hurricanes this week are our team of the week. So tune in for those days. We'll be playing high-low sticking. And you know what? Because there's one not till Thursday, maybe I'll just toss in one or two bonus games because I'm feeling fun. So we'll get to those. You can do that on Twitter at Fourth Line Podcast. You can go to, I almost said www. You could go.
Wow.
I've gone full old man on this right now.
Holy World Wide Web.
Yeah, go to the World Wide Web and find our website, thefourthlinepodcast.com. You can find out all about our show, where you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find some of the great articles. In fact, one of them that we had recently was a Taylor Hall trade destination, and the one and only Joe Martini picked Boston as the trade destination for Taylor Hall. So congratulations. I mean, it's on the website. There's no, Joe can't take it back. He's right. We've got the proof. So you can head over there, check out some of those great pieces. If you're first time listener to the show, thank you very much. You can find more about us as well. You can find us on Full Press Radio and Full Press Radio app. You can head on over there and check us out. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks for, I hope you all didn't sit watching TSN or whichever trade deadline special you were wanting today. If you did, and then also had time for a podcast, you are a diehard hockey fan. And if you didn't sit through this, thanks for letting us be a part of your trade deadline. And we will be here every Monday, waiting for you Tuesday morning, all the way through the regular season and the playoffs, into the off season. We're here every week. Thanks for tuning in.
Time for us to wrap up another Fourth Line show. I know what you're thinking. You don't want us to go. Nick Foligno is now a Maple Leaf. I just realized I can make a rhyme with their head coach, Sheldon Keefe.